protesters kept up the chanting and stomping for hours after police and security forced them out of the public galleries. They could be heard inside the building while politicians held a rare midnight debate on the Ford government's legislation.
Fun to trample people's rights all night.
How would North Bay people feel, Vic? How does North Bay feel about you right now, Vic?
Let's bring in Megan Fitzpatrick, who has been listening to those protesters. She's inside the Ontario Legislature, though, as that goes on outside. What's happening there now? I guess it's a nap time at Queen's Park.
Yeah, it's actually pretty quiet around here right now, Heather. The protesters have gone home, actually. So it's quite a different scene here now than it was just a few hours ago when they were outside the building and yelling and chanting in full force. But right now they have wrapped up the debate, the MPPs, after their all-nighter. So I think they're in their offices having some coffee or having some naps, gearing up for question period that'll happen later. They were here through the night, starting the debate at around midnight. But even before that, there was a large crowd of people that showed up waiting to get into the legislature to witness the debate unfold. And it wasn't too long after it started that some members of the public started heckling the Conservative MPPs and the Premier, shouting things out, which you're not allowed to do. The Speaker warned them to be quiet. They didn't heed those warnings and they were eventually kicked out, but they kept their protests going outside the building. And like I said, they were loud. You could hear them inside the building, inside the legislature. At one point around 1:30 this morning, NDP leader Andrea Horwath went out to speak to them, give them some encouragement, let them know they could be heard here inside the building. But the debate went on for hours and hours with the MPPs on opposite sides of the legislature giving their views. After it had wrapped up, I talked to House Leader Todd Smith, who said about the protesters he understands they have the right to be here and express their views, but that he thinks the Speaker made the right call kicking them out because they were interrupting the proceedings and preventing the MPPs from getting on with the debate. In terms of how the night unfolded, here's what he said about the all-nighter.
It was a long night, but I'll tell you, I was very proud of our caucus. We were there in full numbers. The Premier was there throughout the night. We had some excellent arguments from our ministers, from our other caucus members on why we have the right to invoke Bill 31 and invoke Clause 33 on that. I thought it was a very good debate.
So, of course, the MPPs from the Conservative side of the bench defending the use of the notwithstanding clause to push the legislation through to cut the size of Toronto City Council. The opposition benches, however, criticizing the government for its use and for the issue itself of cutting Toronto City Council in the midst of the election. Andrea Horwath accusing Doug Ford of trying to do this because he has a personal vendetta, she says, against Toronto City Councillors from his time as a city councillor. Here's more of what Andrea Horwath said earlier.
To have Mr. Ford doing what he's doing has not only put Ontario in a very bad place in terms of the history books, but all of Canada is watching this. People across our nation are watching this Premier prioritize his grudge match with Torontonians or with Toronto City Councillors over and above the everyday needs and concerns of families in this province.
We did hear from Premier Doug Ford himself during the debate. Heather, he spoke near the end of it, again defending the government's move and saying that he's heard from a lot of people across Ontario encouraging him to do this and telling him that he's on the right path.
Megan, wondering, 10:30 you've already said that's when question period is set to begin. Is debate on this done for the day, or what do we expect over the rest of the morning?
Yeah, there'll be some more debate in question period, likely on this topic, but other topics as well. So no, they're done the debate on second reading for Bill 31 for the day. After question period, the MPPs will be leaving Queen's Park. Some of them will be heading to what's called the International Ploughing Match, and that is a 5-day agricultural festival that goes on here in Ontario every year that the Queen's Park politicians tend to go to. Traditionally, they go to, and that's why the legislature isn't even going to sit tomorrow to debate the legislation. The party leaders, the MPPs, will be making their way to southwestern Ontario. So in terms of how the rest of the week is going to play out, there will be a pause in debate on the bill tomorrow. They'll come back on Wednesday, which is when they're going to debate a motion on time allocation. So the government is going to introduce a motion to cut down the number of hours excuse me, of debate on the bill, and then we're expecting some votes to happen on Thursday, Heather. So at the earliest, we're looking at a Thursday afternoon, potentially to see a vote on third reading of this bill. And we're also keeping our eye tomorrow on a courtroom in Toronto, because there's going to be an application heard there to have the original decision last Monday that the government lost, have that set aside. So there's still wrangling going on in the courtrooms in Toronto over this issue as well.